Well, good evening, everyone. Just wanted to come on here, talk about a video I saw. Might have happened yesterday, but I just saw the video this morning. Might have happened over the weekend, sometime over the weekend. Anyway, wanted to talk about the protest that happened inside the church. I believe it was in Minneapolis, Baptist church. I come to find out. Don Lemon and his crazy fraud self. Yeah, that was a total that was outrage. It's an outrage that you would invade a church in the middle of church service. Supposedly, I guess the pastor works. I don't know if he actually works for ICE or works for whatever, but anyways, I believe that was the reason they went in there. But nevertheless, Don Lemon and all the folk, is black and white and whatever, some call themselves reverends and pastors, doubtful at best. Because why would you, as a pastor, invade somebody else's service? Why? Why would you do that? They invaded a church service to protest because supposedly the pastor works with ICE. He might not be an ICE agent per se, but he maybe works for that federal agency. Supposedly. I had heard different accounts, but nevertheless, they invaded the church. And then when Don Lemon went to the pastor was like, "We're just trying to conduct service here. I've got a job to do." And he's like, we're exercising our First Amendment. But no, Don Lemon is a liar. First off, he's a liar. He's a liar. He's a liar. He's a liar. He does not understand the Constitution. You don't have any rights on private property. A church is private property. You don't have rights. People need to understand your constitutional rights do not apply on private property. You don't have First Amendment free speech rights. You don't have the right to assemble. You don't have any of those rights on private property. Church is private property. When are these folk going to get it through their thick heads? They violated what is called the FACE Act, which has a maximum of 10 years in prison and $250,000 fine, I believe. Which they probably won't nobody get. But Don Lemon needs the main one, and the rest of the crew need to all be thrown in prison. Every last living one of them. It's absolutely atrocious what happened. That you would go in there, first off, lie that you think you know the law, lie that you say you're a Christian when you're a homosexual, you're an abomination, so you definitely aren't saved, and you ain't a Christian, because a Christian ain't going to invade somebody else's service. And then try to justify your right to be in there. And then the other folk are harassing and trying to intimidate the parishioners. And of course, the church was caught totally off guard. But the thing that gets me is that the men in that church didn't do anything about it until the very last minute. But they didn't do nothing to push them folk out of there. This is why every church, unfortunately, now needs security. Every church, no matter how small or big. Every church, and preferably armed. And I used to be totally against having weapons in a church, but now you have no choice. You have to now. You literally have to have somebody that's armed in a church now, because nobody respects churches anymore. And it's our own fault. It's the church's fault. The reason why people don't respect church is because the church has lost respect because of what the church has done. And I don't mean Christendom as a whole. I'm talking about the man-made church. Okay, the churches that we see, those 3% that I talked about in my last video, that's why people have no respect for churches anymore. And because of them, everybody is messed up. So now every church has to have security, and at least one person in that church should be armed. At least one. At least one. At least one member of that church should be armed and know how to use that weapon, of course. And a lot of churches down south, at least white churches, are. See, they knew not to try that mess in a southern white church because they might not have left out of there. Because these southern white churches, them folk are armed. Somebody's in there is going to be armed because they're smart and they know. It's unfortunate, and it shouldn't have to be that way because people used to respect church property and used to respect churches and leave churches alone, let them do their thing. There's no such thing as respect for churches anymore. There's respect for mosques, but not churches. So again, this is an attack on Christianity because Christianity, we don't defend ourselves. And that's our problem. And if this was a conservative group that invaded a mosque, we'd have never heard the end of it. There'd have been prosecutions going all over the place. But no, this was leftists and Democrats, Don Lemon being the main one, going in there thinking they have a right to do it when they didn't have a right to do it, don't know the law from nothing, totally lying about the law, totally lying, talking about he a Christian when he's not, lying about everything else that he does. All these folk trying to intimidate parishioners by telling them how bad they are and all this other stuff, and they ain't got nothing to do with nothing that's going on in the rest of Minneapolis with ICE. They have nothing to do with any of it. They're just sitting there trying to enjoy service. And as a pastor stated, I'm just trying to conduct service. I want you to leave. Instead of demanding they leave, he just politely asked them to leave. Finally, somebody, I think, tried to stood up because he was berating these women so much. Finally, somebody stood up. But I don't know if he did anything because they didn't show the whole 60-minute video. But this is a problem. This is a real problem. This is a real problem. Is the Justice Department going to press charges on these folk? That's what I want to know. President Trump went all the way and bombed them folk in Nigeria and threatened everything else over there in Africa. What is he going to do here? Are our Christians just as important as those Christians in Nigeria? And that's what I want to know. There's a lot going on in Minneapolis right now. It's a manufactured powder keg. This whole thing in Minneapolis is manufactured. It's manufactured because the Democrats want chaos. And they know how to use chaos. They're smart. They know how to use chaos to their advantage. And what do you think they're doing? They're using chaos. And the thing about it now is they can't use black folk anymore. The BLM thing was found out was all fake and found out it was a bunch of nonsense. So now they're using white folks to be the ones that are outraged, with a few black folk here and there, but mostly white folk, that's what you see on the videos, to be outraged over the illegal immigrants. And it ain't got nothing to do with them. These folk are here illegally. They need to be pushed out. It's just that simple. They broke the law. The law has been on the books for decades, as I explained in many videos. Don Lemon should be ashamed of himself. If he had any integrity, professional integrity, he should be ashamed of himself. For him to lie about his constitutional rights on private property is absolutely outrageous. The man didn't even do his homework, and he calls himself a reporter and a journalist. Get out of here. And then lied about being a Christian. Get out of here. Because no real Christian, even though that word is way overused, and I don't like to use it, would never go into somebody's service and disrupt somebody's service talking about we protesting. No, you would never do that. You would never violate the sanctity of somebody else's service, even another faith. That's not what we do. Who does that? And then these other folks, some of them black folk, call themselves pastors and reverends. They ain't pastors or reverends either. They're just as bad as Don Lemon. They might not be gay like Don Lemon, but they're just as bad. And the reason they didn't invade a black church is because the black church agrees with them. So that's why they went after a white church. See, this is the problem. For the most part, the black church agrees with what Don Lemon and these folk are doing. They agree with it. At least the leadership. And I would argue the majority of them. Even though a lot more voted for President Trump in this election than in his previous term. But still, the majority of black folks voted for Kamala Harris. So they agree with what he did. So of course they didn't go into a black church. A black church probably would have let him sit in the pulpit and speak, because that's what black churches do. I've seen it with my own eyes. And when it happened in the church I was a member of, I got directly with the pastor and told him that was not right. I told him he was wrong for it. Politicians have no place in a pulpit on a platform. They don't deserve that kind of honor. If I, as a preacher, have to wait to be invited up and I'm saved, but a politician who's not can be invited up because he's a community leader, that's ridiculous. So, these people, this whole thing in Minneapolis is manufactured chaos, done on purpose. A lot of these protesters are paid. This is all done on purpose. Don't believe the hype. These folk are falling for it, talking about we scared to go outside. Scared for what? Unless you're an illegal or a criminal, what are you scared for? You shouldn't be scared for. Scared of what? They're not coming after you. If they ask you for your ID, give it to them. That's what IDs are for. To prove that you are who you are. Why have an ID if you never use it? If somebody asks for my ID, I give it to my ID. That's what IDs are for. It's all a scam. Democrat Party knows that if all these illegal immigrants get put out the country, they're done for. The party is done because illegal immigration is all they got. They've used black folks for decades, and they've used them as their automatic voting block for decades, and that's starting to slip. So all they got really left is illegal immigrants because they've been giving them free stuff forever. They're treating illegal immigrants better than they're treating their own black constituents. So how long is the black community going to continue to vote for a Democrat when they're giving illegal immigrants more than they gave the black community? They've been told countless administrations they've been promised all these things, they ain't got nothing. But yet they keep voting Democrat for some reason. I don't understand it. And these illegal immigrants, a lot of them, they're not stupid. Somebody made the analogy that now we're the slave and the illegal immigrants the master, because they're coming into America and taking advantage of the system and using us as a slave. We're the ones paying all the taxes, working and doing all this other stuff, and they're getting all the free stuff. It's a real good analogy. We're now the slave and they're the master, and they're the ones here illegally. Especially them Somali ones that are caught up in all that fraud in Minneapolis. And they're not the only ones, of course. Everybody that's here illegally needs to go, pure and simple, because they're violating the law. We have nothing against people that are here legally. By all means, handle your business, buy you a home, do whatever it is you got to do. If you're on a student visa, go to college, do whatever it is you need to do. Working permit, working visa, whatever it is, do what you do. If you're here legally, by all means, do what you do. As long as you have a way to prove it, handle your business. But if you're not, you got to go. It's just that simple. You got to go. No other country in this world puts up with what we put up with. And it's got to end. It's got to stop. It's got to stop. It's got to stop. And this invasion of a church is absolutely atrocious. And for anybody who agrees with it, you're just as bad as they are. That has nothing to do with any constitutional right or anything that is right and just. Nothing. Nothing justifies you going into the middle of a church service to protest about what ICE is doing when all they're doing is their job, and with warrants taking out people that are here illegally that has nothing to do with you. Again, all this stuff in Minneapolis is manufactured. Manufactured. All this is manufactured by the left, every bit of it. Every bit of it. It's all manufactured. The Democrats know what they're doing. They know how to manufacture chaos. They know how to manufacture chaos. And they do a darn good job of it. And the Justice Department needs to go in there and they need to do what they need to do. They need to charge Don Lemon and all them folk that went in with them with charging with the FACE Act, because they should have never went to that church and bothered none of them folk. They had nothing to do with nothing that ICE is doing. And even if that pastor is an employee of ICE, he's the pastor of that church. And they had no right going in there and protesting anything in the middle of this church service. Again, that violates the FACE Act. Look it up for yourself, because I had to. They only want to implement the FACE Act when it affects Muslims. But when it comes to Christians, nobody wants to do nothing about it. So let's put your money where your mouth is, President Trump. And let's protect Christians here just like you did in Africa. It's absolute outrage. These crazy folk up in here do whatever they feel like they want to do and then get no repercussions for it. Bible says, vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. Here, the Lord's going to have the final say-so in all of this, of course. And the pastor was extremely patient, but he should have been much more forceful and should have pushed them folk out. And churches need to be pushing these folk out. When people come in there and disturb your service, you need to push them out. They have no right to disturb you in the middle of the service. Wait till after church service is over with. If you have a disagreement with a particular pastor or a particular church, wait till service is over with, or catch them before service. Don't do it while they in service. I didn't agree with that guy that went into Jamal Bryant's church. He could have just stayed outside and protested. He decided to go in there. Of course he got pushed out, because they don't put up with that stuff, even though he's a fake church. Even they don't put up with stuff like that. So why would a real church do that? And I don't know what kind of a church, Baptist church they are. I don't know. I've never been there. I don't know what it is. But the simple fact of the matter is they didn't deserve to be invaded by a bunch of crazy folk protesting what ICE is doing when they had nothing to do with anything. Zero. And then you're intimidating folks. You're intimidating parishioners with little kids and women and telling them that they're this, that, and the other, and intimidating them about, eating at Starbucks and what they're wearing and this, that, and the other. I mean, give me a break. They know what they're doing. All this is manufactured. It's all part of the game plan. It's all scripted. Every last bit of it is scripted. Every last bit of it. And there's a bunch of mostly crazy white folks. The left can always count on the crazy white folks. So, and there was nothing peaceful about that, because they know peaceful protest is going to disturb a peaceful service. You could have stayed outside and had your peaceful protest outside the church if that's the case. You don't invade service. You don't do that. But I guarantee that church ain't going to let that happen no more if they're smart. I guarantee every church need to watch that video and take notes, because your church may be next. Especially if you're a white church, because they ain't going after no black church, because most black churches agree with them. So y'all better be ready. And I hate to say that. I hate to separate things by racial lines, because I think race is a man-made construct. That's a legal term. That's all race is a legal term. It's not real. Why does anybody want to be identified by a crayon color? Is stupid to me. But that's what we've done. And I don't like using them terms, but that's the simplest way for people to understand things these days. So, got to be careful. And the simple fact of the matter is when you have stupid folk like Don Lemon who think they're smart and they're not, going there because they're backed by people who don't care about other people, regardless of what your ethnicity is. They don't care. They're just going to do whatever they want because they know they're not going to get in trouble, and harass and intimidate people that have nothing to do with anything, and they'll probably never get in trouble for it. And nobody will do anything about it, and they'll get away with it and just carry on and go invade another church. And it's not going to be a mosque. It's not going to be a Buddhist temple. They're not going to mess with none of them folk. They're just going to hit the Christian churches because we're weak. We don't defend the gospel. We just let folk walk all over us. So you're going to keep coming. They're going to keep coming. They're going to keep coming. And every one of them needs to be arrested. Every last one of them. And they should be ashamed of themselves. And for Don Lemon to call himself a Christian is laughable at best. And at worst, he's a liar. It's ridiculous. Absolute ridiculous. It just upsets me to no end looking at that video. And it's a lot going on in Minneapolis. And it's a lot going on. And it's very chaotic. And it's done on purpose. It's to get people all scared and riled up. Don't believe the hype. Yeah, you can vote for the leftist candidates if you want to. Ain't nothing going to be better. In fact, it's going to be worse. So guess what? You pick the better of two evils, which is what I always tell people. Politicians are politicians. Neither party is necessarily great. You got to pick the better of two evils. That's just politics. As I tell people all the time, pick the party that best fits, in my case, biblical principles, and that would be the conservative party. Not the Republican Party, but conservative ideals. Because both parties are corrupt in their own way. But you got to pick the better of two evils. Because that's all we've got right now. So you pick the better of two evils, and you pick the party that best fits what you believe in. And if you do that, then you can feel good about yourself. You can deal with whatever comes. Is President Trump perfect? By no stretch of the imagination. Does he have issues? Of course he does. All presidents do. So I don't want to hear that either. People that are going to hate President Trump because of who he is. And that's fine. You're going to hate him regardless if he does anything good for you or not. You're just going to hate him because you hate him. And I know people in my church hate him just because they hate him. They just don't like him. They hate him. I'm going to say it. They hate him. They hate him because of who he is. And they don't care. Even if he was to make everything free, they're going to still hate him. They hate him because they hate him. They won't admit to it, but they do. And that's fine. They don't have to. But that's what it is. And that's okay. That's their choice. They didn't say nothing about President Biden and his whole homosexual agenda. They didn't say nothing about that. Even though homosexuality is very anti-biblical. The whole LGBTQ thing, the whole 9 yards. Totally anti-Bible. Didn't say absolutely not one word. They didn't attack him personally. They didn't try to attack his character. They didn't do none of that stuff. You know, he was suffering obvious dementia and, everything else. But that's okay. Their choice. The simple fact of the matter is churches should be left to do what they do, and that is be able to congregate and worship the Lord in peace and freedom, and not be interrupted by fools and idiots like Don Lemon and the people that were with him for some stupid, idiotic, false reason in this case, and disturbing and intimidating and threatening parishioners. They all should be arrested and thrown in prison. Every last one of them. They violated the law. That pastor should have called the police. The men in that church should have kicked them out. And if it happened in the South, somebody would have pulled out a gun. because we don't play down here. But unfortunately, if they'd have went into a black church, they probably would have been invited up to the platform to speak. And that's the difference. And that's why they attacked a white church. Plus, in Minnesota, they have very, very strict gun laws. So they knew what they were doing. They knew what they were doing. But down here, we have open carry. People ain't going to mess around down here. So the simple fact of the matter is I just came on here because some things just are, as I would like to say, sacred and should be left that way. And regardless of what your faith is, I don't care if you're a Muslim, a Buddhist, or whatever you are, if whatever day you worship, you should be left alone to do whatever it is that you do. I don't care what it is. Leave you alone, let you do your thing. If I got an issue with you, I can talk to you afterwards. But when it's your time to do whatever it is that you do, I need to be leaving you alone, and that's your time. And we as Christians, most of the time, it's either Saturday or Sunday. Most often it's Sunday, except for the Seventh-day Adventists, they do it on Saturday. But that's our time. Leave us alone, let us worship, and then afterwards you can protest and do whatever you want and whatever. But leave them people alone. You have no right to go into that church as private property. You had no right to walk into that church. First and foremost, not only did you violate the FACE Act, but you trespassed on private property. You trespassed. You didn't have a permit to go on private property. Don Lemon straight up lied to that pastor. And that pastor was so caught off guard, he didn't even question it. And they knew what they were doing. They caught him straight up off guard. They knew exactly what they were doing. Poor pastor. He better learn from this. That's all I got to say. He better learn from this, and his men in that church better learn from this too. Because they dropped the ball big time on this. The men should have straight up stood up and put all of them out. They should have not let one of them protesters talk nothing to them women and then young girls and boys and said anything threatening or anything to them. They should immediately have put them out. But, who knows? I can't speak for the men of that church. But this is a warning to each and every Christian church out there, regardless of color. Y'all need to have somebody on security in that church. Multiple people if you haven't. And somebody better be armed. At least one person better be armed. Licensed. When I say armed, I mean licensed and know how to use that thing. Not all of us can be like Church of the Highlands here in Alabama that have off-duty police officers every Sunday at every campus. Most churches ain't got it like that. We don't have the money or the budget for that. You better have somebody at your church. If your church can afford it, send them to get their pistol license, send them to a class, and get them trained. Every church needs security now. Everyone needs somebody who's armed in their church. And I hate to say that because I used to be very much against having guns in a church because a church is a sacred place. But guess what? The world doesn't look at it as a sacred place anymore. They'll come walk in and start shooting you up. They don't care. And guess what? You got to be able to defend yourself. So, in knowing that and in seeing examples of this many times, you have to be prepared. This is the warning. This is your warning. You can either listen or not, but this is the warning. What you saw yesterday in Minneapolis with the stupid and idiotic Don Lemon and the crew is a warning to every church. You could be next. They're coordinated. They know what they're doing. They're on script. They're going to say the most vile things to you, and they don't care who they hurt. And even though they might not be armed, the next time they might be. That's just how crazy they are. Be prepared. Be prepared. All right, well, like, subscribe, hit the notification bell. If you like my videos, please share with somebody else if you think it's something that's substantive. Thank God for everybody who's left comments, liked, and of course my subscribers. And until next time, of course, when you leave a comment, as always, be respectful. But until next time, God bless you.